What up, party peeps? We are back every week. We open up and ask me anything. CJ specifically opens up and asks me anything on my Instagram story for you guys to submit questions, and then we get to answer them in these conversations.
Yeah, what's up? So I'm CJ. I'm the brand director. I'm the one fielding all your questions. And this week we went super personal for Cody with it. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, for sure. So it's been a year since Breakup. That kind of changed a lot in my life. The content I make and all sorts of different things like that. And it's a large reason why I help the people I help and how I help them. This week, we let people ask me about my last breakup. It's been a year again since it happened. I've gone through a crazy healing journey and gone through a lot in relation to it. And y'all came through, asked some really good freaking questions. We had more questions for this in the first 2 minutes it was up than any other Ask Me Anything ever. Might have to do a round 2 of this, I suppose.
Yeah, we'll have to see. But I'm here to ask the questions and to be some community because obviously this is a rough video to have to go into alone.
Yeah, which mirrors the healing process that you were a part of as well. So I truly appreciate that, which we'll talk about.
So, yeah, we'll get into all of that. Let's set the stage. We're going to start with the rough one because the people wanted to know. So we got some questions about who broke up with who and what were the reasons.
So I'm going to I'll talk about some of this stuff, but I'm going to protect privacy as much as possible as well. I think it's probably obvious that she broke up with me in this situation based on the type of content I do and how I help people, that she broke up with me. It sucked. We were at her place. She started crying and then said, we need to break up. I was literally completely blindsided. There is 0% of me that thought that those would be the words that came out of her mouth next. I'm pulling these answers and things, which we'll get into how this was helpful for me, from my rumination journals that I did as this was going on. I journaled about feelings, my thoughts, everything that was popping up, all of this stuff when it was really raw. And part of what I described in my early rumination journals and breakup journals was that this is the most unexpected traumatic attachment rupture of my entire life. And that is true. I mean, it was a wild time. I didn't expect it. Things looked pretty normal the day before, and it just, or not normal. There were some things that kind of happened, that just life circumstance stuff that happened that caused dysregulation without a doubt within my ex. And I could feel that. There was just no part of me that thought that, I could tell that there was a lot that was being held and that the system was getting stress tested and pushed on, and that something was going to drop. If there's a bunch of plates in the air, something was going to drop. And it just 0% of me thought that one of the plate that would drop would be me and our relationship. That was not something that was in my head. So it was wild. The reasons were mostly unclear. To be honest, the words out of her mouth included things like she didn't think she could be the girlfriend that I needed, that I deserved better. But there wasn't a hardcore explanation outside of some of that stuff, which again is not uncommon for the kind of breakup that it was and kind of the pattern that was kind of being exhibited. I hear this all the time now with my clients and stuff, from guys, from girls, from all different angles and such. So those were kind of the reasons, if you will. It's one of those things where you I didn't know. That was a huge part of going through this kind of breakup, more like a discard or just being blindsided type thing, where you just don't really understand and it's not being communicated to you. And then all of a sudden you're not together anymore. You're just by yourself and you have to figure all this stuff out. And so there's just a lot of in that there initially, and again, this is in my rumination journals and stuff I talked about in therapy, because crazily enough, the literal day that this happened, so it happened on a Monday, and then following Tuesday, said goodbye, never talked again after that. But that Tuesday, right after it happened, I had therapy. I got to talk about some of the stuff there as well, which I just freaking, God bless Caitlin. I freaking love her. She's awesome. But that's my therapist. She was helping me walk through how there wasn't a ton of real clear reasons. And so there's a lot of meaning making that I was doing and trying to figure things out and using the skills and my training and my development or my neuroscience and attachment and all this stuff that I know about relationships to figure this out and try to close this loop in my brain. And not having a direct answer from her or being able to have seen this coming did make it a lot harder to process through some of that stuff. And there wasn't really any closure from her either. That was something that I had to, it was about a month after the actual breakup, and I was still kind of what the fuck is going on? I remember saying that so many times in therapy. So many of my therapy sessions started with, what the fuck just happened? Is this real? What just happened? And I was just I don't know how many times I said that to Caitlin. It was crazy. And there again, about a month after, I reached out to see if could we do some closure? Could we have a conversation about this? This is just unbelievable that this has occurred. It was just my brain could not fucking close that loop. And so reached out to see if there was any closure, and she did not feel like that made sense for her and for her journey. So we ended up not doing that either, which ultimately ended up feeling like a second rejection and a second abandonment. So when I talk with my clients or in my content about trying to get closure from someone else and how it doesn't freaking work, trust me, I have freaking tried, and it just doesn't give you what you think it does. It forced me to create my own closure, which I think ended up being better anyway. ways. So that's kind of where I was left, like just kind of having to create my own meaning and shift the stories in my head. And we'll talk more about that.
Yeah, so people that have like followed you for a little bit might know some about that story just because we've like touched on it. And obviously we had a pretty big content shift because we wanted to do something that was like true to this. We realized it was kind of like a hole in the market. So that's something that a lot of people were talking about. But with people knowing a little bit about that, the next question we got was, how did you deal with the injustice of someone discarding you? And then with that, I think maybe also set the scene a little. We've talked about kind of what that discard feels like. It's out of nowhere. Can you talk about what's happening in your nervous system when that happens and the why for it? Because I think a lot of people go through this and then they feel kind of crazy, kind of offbeat because they're like, I don't want to be reacting like this. I should be angry. This person has wronged me. Obviously, kind of, as is mentioned in the question here, this injustice bit. How did you deal with it and why is it so hard for our nervous systems?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. It's interesting, the injustice part. Like, how do you deal with the injustice of being discarded? When I saw this question at first, my first gut reaction was, I didn't feel injustice. That's not the feeling that I had. That's what I thought, okay? Like, it's been over a year now, right? That was my first thought. So what I did is I uploaded hundreds of pages of my journals and my learnings and like all the stuff that I did to heal and everything into a Claude project. So that is like an archive of all of my stuff. And then I asked Claude, hey, what were some of the things that I struggle with injustice? Like what was going on with this? Like, did I write about that at all? And it was like, it's hilarious that I didn't presently remember how much injustice I felt, but I literally wrote, I did all the right things and still got fucked. It's not fair and it fucking sucks. And I literally verbatim wrote that. In therapy, I totally forgot that we had found an entire exiled part of me that we labeled as injustice. Like that, and it was kind of the feeling that what we kind of identified is that the kindest, most open and caring person just getting totally abandoned. That was the story and the narrative that this little part of me kind of had in its head, that this thing had just happened to me. And the other cruel part about this is that it almost felt like what happened, like this abandonment, was framed as someone doing a favor for me. Like, oh, this is what's best for you. And this is what, like, and I know better. And like, I'm just like, what? Why do you get to tell me that? And that for sure was something that this injustice definitely popped up. And I did feel this injustice. Like, I felt like, how can someone, I was mad. Like I'm like reading the direct quotes here. I felt furious that someone could say that they loved you while simultaneously ignoring me and like after the breakup articulating, oh, I still love you and you're great and you're amazing and all this stuff, while simultaneously ignoring me, not making eye contact, like not wanting to like have some closure created around this. Like it just felt like words being said didn't match actions. And it was so disorienting and painful. I did not like it. And some things that really helped me is writing these things down. Like again, I have hundreds of pages of this stuff and some not trying to just shove it down, just the rage-filled journals, kind of letting all of it out and all of the like the verbatim things that little part of me, that exiled part of me that felt the injustice. Because it's not me, myself, that feels it's unjust. It's a part of me that felt like something unjust was happening. So letting that part speak and just letting it puke all of its stuff out was really helpful. And just like putting it all down on paper, getting it out of bouncing around in my head was super, super helpful. And on the other side, I always came back to compassion and knowing that her parts, not herself, were responsible for kind of what was going on. And that was a really big piece of recognizing that these avoidant type patterns or this shutdown pattern was more of a capacity mismatch under stress and less of it being about me or a character assassination of me. And so really shifting, it took a minute, but one of the best things that helped me shift from the injustice was getting out of that mode, was reframing that it's not that I wasn't enough, it's that she just didn't have capacity. And that really helped me a ton in relation to getting out of that mindset. And the parts work. IFS is the other piece of this. Like I mentioned this a couple times. I realized that this injustice part was a part of me. And then I was able to talk to it. The mad part, the angry part, the part that felt unjust, like all of these different parts of me. Okay. And then the other thing on the other side of that, once I unblended from those parts, myself came out and I was curious, calm, compassionate. And that brought more self-energy towards her and her parts as well, and recognizing that it was parts of her, right, that hurt me potentially, or that did hurt me, not herself, and that those parts of her were trying to keep her safe and were doing what they thought was best for her. That helped a lot because that doesn't feel like injustice to me. It just feels like her parts doing the best thing that they could and what they thought they needed to do. And that really helped break that pattern of like injustice. The more overt thing that I felt was, instead of injustice, was more like a lack of control. That was the part that when I initially read this question, that was was the first thing that popped in my head. Was what I remember feeling more than anything was just a lack of control. I study this. I'm trained in internal family systems. I have a degree in this. I work with people in relationships. Sure, we pivoted to like breakup content and like healing heartbreak content, but my first viral video was about toxic relationships ever. Like millions of views, and like relationships and studying that stuff and those patterns is what I've always done for a very long time. And I had all these skills. I knew all these things, and this stuff still happened to me. I still could do nothing about it. I could see how stressed she was. I could see what she was going through. I could understand the shutdown. All of this stuff did not prevent it from happening to me, and did not give me any ability to do anything about it other than what I had to do eventually, which is focus on myself and heal myself. So as far as injustice, I mean, I feel like for me, it was more the lack of control is what I remember. But then when I look back again at my journals, like I literally named a part of myself, the injustice part. So it is definitely something I struggled with initially and wrestled with it. But again, working with that part, calling it out as a part of me and not just letting it be me and be in that like mindset and be blended with that and be a victim of this unjust thing forever was super, super powerful and helped me kind of break out of that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that makes sense. We'll still like touch on the nervous system piece real quick, but I think that makes, it'll all come together when we explain kind of what is the state of your nervous system after a discard and why might it attach itself to that unjust narrative.
Right. Well, so that's the other half is there's a lot of stuff that's going on in your brain and in your nervous system, like post breakup, that mirrors addiction and withdrawal from addiction. And so if you look at like a brain, there's all sorts of different brain regions and stuff that are like shifted and changed. Like post breakup, your parts of your prefrontal cortex are completely shrunk, and like your ability to control and future cast and all this stuff are just in the gutter. Like anterior cingulate cortex, the inferior part of your prefrontal cortex, your lateral orbital frontal cortex, like all of these different portions of your brain have shrunken. Of the decision making, like logical reasoning portion of your brain are just kind of shut down, and your amygdala, your hippocampus are way more active and way more enlarged. So there's more emotional memories. There's more things that are coming up. There's a part of your brain that nobody talks about called the anti-reward portion of your brain that enlarges or gets more activated. Enlarges is a weird way to frame it, but I'm just thinking about it in a picture, and a way to demonstrate more activation in a picture is to make it larger in comparison to like a non-breakup brain. So, but your habenula activates, and it essentially, it makes everything gray. It turns down like dopamine. It produces anhedonia. The lateral habenula specifically has been in research, has been shown to be associated and like connected with anhedonia, which is the inability to feel pleasure. So that's why like you're out with friends, but you just feel bland. Like even eating doesn't feel good. Like it almost feels like depression. It's not quite the same as depression. It's just this, what's happening essentially is this connection that you had with this person created a ton of safety, connection, love, and great feelings and dopamine and all sorts of good things for a long time. And so your brain got used to that. And then when that goes away, essentially your habenula is like, all right, well, I'm going to make literally everything other than that one thing feel really shitty so that you go back to that one thing that created safety and connection for us. And it does that kind of in the short term. And that's what really, really makes it, like, I know there's a question about like depression and stuff. We'll talk more about that and kind of my lived experience, but what's happening in the brain more is what I'm explaining right now is everything just gets, there's no color, right? And it's just your habenula turning down reward on everything else so that you go back to that thing, which your amygdala and your hippocampus are more lit up now. Your nucleus accumbens and like your reward center, your ventral tegmental, like VTA are all lit up and more active as well. All of these emotional memories are coming up. So you're ruminating and spiraling and all this stuff. And then habenula is making everything else feel shitty. And so it's just like this perfect combination of brain things that lead to the way you subjectively feel. And all the things I'm describing mirror withdrawal from drugs, like very intense drugs. And so this is not a metaphor. Like there are some differences between like drugs and love, because one is an exogenous substance and one is evolutionarily primed to help us survive and like internal. So there are some other differences as well, but they are, as far as what's going on in the brain, it looks very similar. And so those are some of the things that I literally experienced and felt. I couldn't scan these regions of my brain or check the activity necessarily, but I just know that those are the things that were kind of going on neurologically as I was kind of healing through this stuff. And so some of the things that help with this, one of the biggest things that helped me was leaning on my close friends. Like CJ, the number of times, I've said this a million times in conversations, but we have a one-on-one and we meet multiple times a week right? Because we're on the same team. During the early days of that, there were so many of those like full content shoots that just turned into me talking and us having conversations about this stuff. And that was super, super helpful. And like my friend, like Puckett helped me a ton, my friend Chris and my buddy Sam Kulikov, just hanging out and like planning things and like going and kind of helping me get a reality check and reminding myself that my value is in me, not outside of me. And just getting a lot of reps on that belief and on that perspective was super, super helpful, helping my brain heal and get other sources of oxytocin connection and things like that. And then working with that, my core, like that abandonment wound in therapy. Like I really zoned in on like trusting love again. Like that very early on, that was very hard for me. Like for a long time, it felt like there was no way that I could ever be so open and vulnerable or trust love again. And that was really fucking tough. And again, that habenula was activating and making all of these things feel impossible. And my ability to future cast my prefrontal cortex again was smaller. So like it early on, it felt really hard to do that. And it just didn't feel like it would be worth it. But the more that I worked to stop outsourcing my safety to a relationship or to someone outside of myself, and the more that I developed the belief that I can create that safety for myself inside of myself first, I started to regain the belief that it is worth it. And it is, and we'll talk more about this in some of these other questions, and I just don't regret it. I love so freaking hard, and the rupture was excruciating, like 100%, but I still got to the point where I redeveloped the belief that love is worth it. That helped pull me through the rest of the healing process as well. Because it wasn't like a helpless type of feeling. It was like, okay, this is worth it. You do it again. Like it's part of the game. And that helped a lot.
Yeah. Sneak peek on a little bit of like when we get into the healing segment there, especially. But when we're going to still touch on like while we're still in it, because obviously the biggest question we got, because it was like also mentioned in the AMA post, was about rumination and like that constant rumination that you're going through. So this is going to be like sort of a 3-part tell us about it, which is tell us what the rumination was like, how you broke the rumination loop, and how long it took. Combined questions from all of you, because we got a lot of variation on this one.
Okay, so what it was like for me, again, I pulled a lot from my actual journal so you can hear my literal words, but one of the things that I literally wrote is that it was relentless from day one. The moment I'm awake, it's all right there. And I totally remember that. I remember the second I opened my eyes, like I would usually think like I'm going to text her, or there would be a text from her, or we'd be planning for our day or checking in or whatever, and not there. Or like in a relationship, not like just sleep together like sex, but like you're in the same bed. Like you go to sleep together, you wake up together, and like there's like that routine just gone. And I just remember that so fucking vividly. It sucked. I couldn't sleep a lot of the times. Like it took me forever to get to sleep when I did fall asleep, and then my stomach would hurt. It was really hard to focus at work, especially for like the first couple of weeks and stuff. I multiple times would wake up in the middle of the night crying, or I'd wake up in the morning and I would cry, or like there was just a lot of freaking crying. Like I remember, luckily enough, I'm in the relationship space, so there's all sorts of relationship content that I start to see. And as you start to, it's wild how fast your algorithm can start to shift and change once it registers he's watching breakup content more, and it just starts putting more of that in front of your face. And it's like, dude, what the hell is happening here? But I remember there was one video that the guy and the girl were talking on the couch, and she was had brought something up that he didn't really understand what was going on. And it was like, it just very much mirrored what happened, like the literal moment of the breakup for me. And I just remember my hand shaking and just my chest got super tight. And it was like a full on response just from something that resembled the night of my breakup. Like it was intense. It was wild. And it was just all sorts of stuff. It was like thoughts. I mean, being in the shower and just like replaying conversations, or how could I have done that night differently? What could I have said differently? In the days leading up to it, was there stuff that I could have said differently, and I could have reacted differently, and I could have been there differently, and I could have asked these questions differently? Or thinking about early in the relationship, did I overgive? Did I overfunction? Which led to this lack of gap in reciprocity, which led to her feeling overwhelmed. And like all of these freaking things just nonstop, like on repeat, thinking about seeing her with other people. Like, and that just fucking ripping me apart. And I hated that. Before I kind of closed the chapter myself on like a reunion or getting back together or like a closure conversation, I would also, that was stuff I thought about as well. Like, what would that look like? How would the conversation go? What would I say? How would I say it? How would I want it to go? Like, how could I make sure I get everything out but not overwhelm? And like it was just all of this stuff. I would fantasize about sometimes, like I make a lot of content. Like maybe she sees a piece of content, it hits her or something, and she realizes all the things that happened and comes back and is like, I'm sorry. And like we make up, and it like everything's hunky dory, even though it literally, it wouldn't go that way. Like even if that actually happened. And then just hope loops, like hope loops that things would change. When you're with someone for, especially like over a year, there's a lot of like throughout the year, there's like different environmental triggers and like things that come up, like holidays or things about their schedule that you know because of, like you're with them during that portion of their life last year and that kind of stuff. And so for the first year, there was a lot of that kind of stuff that would trigger different types of rumination because you would have known where they were at, what they were doing, and what you would have been doing with them or not with them, how you would have hung out before or after, like all of these different things. And that was just not there anymore. And that created a lot of rumination as well. So I think that pretty well summarizes kind of what it was like. I mean, I'd wake up with all these thoughts just running through my brain the first couple of weeks, and they'd pop up in the middle of the day. Usually I'd like get some coffee, get my day started, and I could like kind of get through some of the day a little bit, but stuff would still pop up. I just had to be slow with myself and gentle. But yeah, that was kind of what it was like. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, so you talk a lot about like filling in like conversations, these imaginary scenarios, which I think feeds into this next part perfectly, is because we know like a lot of that happens because the loop isn't closed. Meaning, so like essentially you aren't getting closure on, why all of this has happened, and that leads your brain to just kind of run a little bit wild. So yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. And now we can get into kind of like the why that was happening and how do you actually close the loop to fix some of that.
Yeah, so the journaling helped me a lot. The fact that I can like read these things to you now is because I literally journal pages and pages of just writing stuff, getting it out of my brain. A lot of your brain is for visual processing, and getting stuff out of your head and onto paper is super, super helpful and really, really powerful. So journaling with structured prompts, even if you just generate them from ChatGPT, because that was the other thing. I had created a custom GPT that I loaded up all of the IFS stuff and everything that I'm trained in and all of the skills and everything that I know about myself and my content and things like that, and created this GPT that was like to help me with some of these things and give me prompts and give me things to think about. And that was really, really helpful as well to help me kind of have something and someone that could, or something, I guess, that could be there and just would always respond and stuff. And I created and prompted it in a way that it didn't like bullshit me. It like gave me direct answers and stuff because I know what I was kind of looking for and the perspective I needed. And I didn't just want to be told, oh, you were right, and you're all this stuff like that. I don't think that would have been helpful. So I don't know that I would tell everyone to do that. I put in like 10, 20 books on like super specific types of trauma therapy and relationship therapy and like all sorts of stuff. So I digress on that point. That did help though with some of the ruminations because I could put them in there and it could help me shift those ruminations and help me journal on them and help me reframe them. And that was super, super helpful. Just changing all of those ants, like automatic negative thoughts, into positive empowering thoughts. And I even did that once. That was one of the things that I did that helped with this was I created a page where I put all of the automatic negative thoughts that would pop up and all the ruminations and the things that would trigger me into rumination, and then reframed them all and rewrote them all in a positive, empowering way that helped me start to replace those automatic negative thoughts with more empowering ones. That was really, really helpful. Doing exile work with Caitlin, again, was also very powerful because you have to remember that it wasn't me that was ruminating. There was a part of me that was ruminating, and having a conversation and talking to and unburdening that part of me that was ruminating was another really powerful way. That's an IFS, internal family systems process. Something that was a sleeper that Chloe works with CJ and I, she runs Chloe Goes Inward. I forgot who it's from, some Peter guy, I think, but Chloe had mentioned that something to help her in the past was this I don't know tool. And essentially what you do is when you start to ruminate, you're like, oh, well, what are they doing? Who are they with? Are they with someone? Did they make up? Are they dating someone? Do they think about me? What do they think? All of these different things that pop up in these unanswerable questions, essentially. This tool gives you an answer for those and closes the loop. And it's just, I don't know, and that's okay. I don't know, and that's okay. And I said that tons of times. And at first I was like, okay, this is bullshit. This is ridiculous. I hate this. It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like it's actually helping. But then over time, it truly freaking did. Like I would get to a point where I would almost be giddy. I'd be like, yeah, I have no freaking idea. And that's okay, actually. And it would close the loop and like just cut off the rumination instantly because I just was telling myself, that's okay. It's all right. You don't have to know. It's not your responsibility to know anymore. And that was so freaking helpful, like as a tool, that I would just say it all the time. The other one is What a Pleasure. And this also comes from Chloe. She was going through this Kabbalah course and she's like, this has been super helpful for me. I think would help you during your breakup. You should check this out. So I did. And one of the biggest things that they talk about in there was, again, this What a Pleasure thing. And it's just another little sentence or statement. And essentially it's just, they just say where you just go, no matter what's happening, you're just like, oh, what a pleasure. What a pleasure. And you just offer it up and you change it from this negative thing. Oh, I'm ruminating as I'm driving to whatever thing right now, or something I saw in my environment triggered me. What a pleasure. And I get to handle this and work through this. And that really helped me reframe a lot in relation to cutting off the rumination and breaking through this stuff. A big turning point for me was the closure that I created for myself. Like once I got to a point where I asked, like, could we have a closure conversation like with her? And she said no. I was like, okay, that hurt really bad in one way, but it also fully closed the door in a way for me, which helped and allowed me to fully close the door from my side as well by creating my own internal closure. And that actually, the finality of that did help with some of the rumination and stuff as well. And after that, I was like, okay, I mean, there is nothing left outside of me that will give this closure to me. I have to give it to myself. And I got to that point and created a closure process based on, again, like all the stuff I study, like neuroscience and psychology and like internal family systems. And so I wrote a closure letter where it was, I think, maybe a 10, 11 page thing of just everything I wanted to say, the good stuff, the bad stuff, the stuff unsaid, the stuff I wish I could have said, like the way I wish it would have gone, like everything. I got it all out, burned that. It was not something I sent to her or anything like that. I just deleted it. There's this process called a Ho'oponopono, which is a Hawaiian forgiveness, like ritual and process. It has this like visual where it's like this cord cutting, this energetic connection. They call them Aka connections. I learned it from Dr. Matt, and that was super helpful. I did that many times, where it's just like, it's a forgiveness process where you're just cutting that energetic connection. And I would do that multiple times. And then also changing up my environment a little bit. I moved some things around my apartment and just made shit my own. Those 3 things really helped me a lot. And it was really the first big moment of like physical release. Like my shoulders came down, my jaw unclenched, and I could just feel my body relax for the first time. That also happened as I was doing deeper exile work and deeper, like working on my deeper wounds and abandonment wound and like the rejection and the abandonment, like that, those bigger stuff inside of like therapy and working with inside of the IFS framework, working with those wounded parts. That's also when I felt safe again and felt more like energy, like confidence, courage, clarity coming back into my body. So those are some of the things on like how to do it. How long this lasted really for me, I mean, I was the first few weeks unbearable, like unbelievable. Like it fucking sucks. I still had some 2.5, 3 months out. And like in my journal, I noted, there's a note here that says that as far as like late July, I thought I had gotten through it and thought it was over, but then more stuff started to come up. It was fewer and far between, but it definitely still did come up. But then by August-ish, I was doing really, really good as far as like rumination. So I would say 3-4 months or so is about how long for me doing the things that I did, creating the closure for myself and not opening the loop over and over and over again. I unfollowed her on all social media. I changed her picture in my phone. All of these things I did to ensure that I had space and freedom. I changed CrossFit gyms, like all sorts of different things to make sure I wasn't just reopening that loop. And that really helped me a lot as well in relation to the speed at which I got through these ruminations and such. Not to say that you need to get through them fast, but that's kind of what it was like for me.
Yeah, and I think something I'd add on that I know we've talked about is like remembering and ruminating are very, very different things. Because if your life is like very intertwined with somebody's for a year or more, then you're probably not just going to forget. There's always going to be kind of things that remind you of them. It's about are you locking on to that thing or not? And just remembering isn't necessarily a bad thing, because then of course you can go like, oh, what a pleasure, use some of those tools to move on from it, but don't let yourself just marinate.
Right. Yeah, no, that's, you got to break that for sure.
So with like a kind of a sidebar to the rumination topic and what it's like a little bit in that earlier part of the breakup, something that a few people have asked about and we've touched on is depression and like depressing feelings. And so 2 questions we've kind of combined here are, were you depressed and like staying in bed for days on end? And how did you start enjoying life again?
Yeah, this is a great one. So as I mentioned earlier, with that habenula portion of your brain, that anti-reward portion of your brain being more active in a breakup, things can start to feel bland. And I literally in my journal, I said, one of the things I wrote is that everything I feel meaningless, purposeless, dissociated, and like everything just feels like blah. That's literally what I wrote, especially in the mornings and especially on the weekends. That's when it was the worst for me. Like the weekends a lot. And one of these other questions is like having intertwined lives. Like the weekend is when we would hang a lot more and we would do a lot of joint things and just be together constantly. And so early on, the weekends were really hard because a lot of what I did was intertwined with what she was doing and just us doing stuff together. And so it was really freaking hard for me early on, separating those things and not just feeling completely like I should be doing something else, but I have to do this thing for myself now, like, or by myself, like that's terrible. So as far as classic stay in bed for days, depression wasn't my personal experience. My nervous system does not tend towards depression. I tend more towards anxiety and like hyperactivation, not hypoactivation generally. I will admit though, I will say that this was the closest I've probably been to what depression feels like. And I freaking hated it. Like it was not fun. It was not enjoyable. I was trying to say what a pleasure, but I didn't want to. Like it was terrible. And then, I just got to some low places and stuff more than I ever had. Because again, I tend more towards the high side. And like one of the first times ever I had thoughts of like suicidal thoughts and things like that pop into my brain, not in any serious way, but more in just a way of like, I wonder if I did something like this, would they get her attention? Like wild thoughts like that. I guess that's more of like an intrusive thought almost. And so, but not in the fact that I was just like in bed for days and like that kind of stuff. And that popped in, popped out, talked about it with Caitlin in therapy. And like, it was nothing that I like stayed stuck on and like was like reoccurring, but it was one of the first times in my life that's like a thought like that popped into my head. And I just was like, whoa, I just didn't expect it. So as far as the experience of depression, that was kind of where I was at. For me, I felt much more like what I was describing earlier, where that anti-reward portion of my brain was just dysfunctional and making everything else bland. And it took some time to recalibrate that, but it does recalibrate. And some of the ways to do that, I had talked with, this is wild, but I had talked with a mentor of mine his name is Dr. Paul Zak, and he is the leading neuroscientist on oxytocin and connection. And we just so happened to be on a call a couple weeks after the breakup. And he was talking to me. He's like, oh, dude, you need to replace oxytocin. Like you're going through oxytocin withdrawal. And I was just like, what? And he's like, you need to be hanging with other people. You need 8-second hugs. You need like all of these different things that really help a lot. And the one thing that helped me so freaking much with this specific aspect was he's like, if you have a dog or your parents have a dog or someone would be willing to let you like house sit their dog for a little bit, that would help you a lot. Having a companion, having someone or something that's excited to see you when you walk in the door, that cuddles with you, that creates oxytocin. And he was like, dogs release the most oxytocin of any companion animal. And so getting a dog be super, super helpful. Not like getting a dog, but at least borrowing one or fostering one or something. And so luckily enough, my parents have dogs and I grew up with my dog Ivy and she came and hung out with me for a few weeks. And oh my God, dude, that absolutely helped me so freaking much with this specific thing, like the depressive type feelings. That helped me so much, and socially connecting with other people and things like that. So yeah, it was hard. I remember Mother's Day was really close to when this breakup happened as well last year. Like God bless my mother, because I was completely dissociated while I was out with her. Couldn't focus. I just felt completely detached, and it was just like had to been the worst. And it was my brother was out of town or something, so it was I was the one that like had to do something with her on Mother's Day, and like I just was probably like the worst possible son on that day. And then this year I was literally sick, so my mom deserves next year she's gonna have a banger Mother's Day. But I definitely went through that phase. The oxytocin really helped me a lot. The other thing that helped kind of beat this depressive state after a breakup was early on, especially, was working out more, social connection, working more in general, and having a very clear purpose. Like I work for myself and I work for my purpose. I don't work for someone else or have to force myself to go to work. I don't even think about it as work, as CJ knows. And so like having that very clear purpose and working on something bigger than me and serving other people was really, really helpful at the time as well. Time with my family, trying different things, watching movies. Like I watched the entire Marvel, the whole MCU timeline, the whole thing, like from start to finish. Like I freaking love Marvel. And so that was just really great to like, be able to do that. I did more of that than I usually did. They were really useful distractions and like the way I would say a healthy way and a helpful way. But there is a point where you got to do the like actual deeper work as well. And that is a big piece of like breaking through this and beating these things as well. So it's not just a bunch of band-aids. And that the becoming programs that I created, like the Becoming Her and Becoming Him programs that we have, these frameworks really did give me a light at the end of the tunnel and a new identity to grow into. And I really shifted out of just surviving grief into something that I could become. And it made it to where there was hope and light at the end of the tunnel. And it really moved me out of closure and into creating something. And that really helps because your brain is really great at creating things and really bad at like going backwards. Like you can create new connections better than you can just go destroy old ones. Like you can myelinate new things better. And so that's where the Becoming Her, Becoming Him programs came from, is my own personal journey, shifting from closure to creation and like creating this vision for myself to bust out of the grief and bust out of this like depressive type stuff. I didn't just mystically pull that out of my ass. Like I literally went through it and built it myself. So that was another thing that helped me in this phase. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I mean, I think in this, the biggest thing that stands out is obviously like replacing that dopamine, because you're getting hits all the time when you're with somebody that you really, really like. And I think that that's a pretty good transition into the next question, which is obviously like a major factor in kind of this like feeling is the loss of dopamine. And with that, the bigger feelings are loneliness and depression. And something that was asked was, how do you deal with a breakup when your lives are intertwined? With the example of friends or hobbies. And I know that this is something that was like really, really important to you. And we talked a lot about is like having to go be very proactive about building a community of support after this.
Yeah, I mean, it was something that looking back is something I definitely learned, and a growing edge for me in this relationship was there's a couple confounding factors that just all collided at once. But I was very much isolated, or not isolated in a specific way, but just functionally isolated, because at that point whenever you're building a business, like the first 3 to 5 years are a roller coaster. The first 3 years, insane. You never know up from down. You never know if you're going to make enough money to pay everybody and yourself. And I was right in that to ending the second year in third year phase. And it was just complete and utter chaos. And I had to just work so freaking much in this relationship. And so most of my life was working out, working, and my relationship primarily. I was not hanging with my friends as much as I used to. I was still playing basketball, which was really, really fun. But it just I just was so zoned in and locked in on this stuff that I just did not maintain the other social structures and support systems and all this stuff. I was still going to therapy. I still did that, which was amazing and helpful. But I can admit that I isolated myself more in that relationship because I was just so focused, just grinding in a period where I was kind of in the cave, kind of on monk mode, which ultimately probably not the most helpful thing that happened. But looking back, probably not a smart move to have done that. But it is what it is. I've learned from it and I'm growing on that. But that is definitely something that was really, really hard for me. And I started doing CrossFit inside this relationship as well, and which I freaking love to this day. But it just so happened that that gym became a lot of the friendships that were there, were her friends before mine. And I was just starting to get to know some of them and connecting with them and working out and getting into that community and around those people and things like that, which was cool. And really, I loved it. And I was having a lot of fun and we shared a lot of friends. But again, mine versus hers, it leans more towards hers and things like that. So, and I recognize, again, looking back, the pressure that could put on a relationship and things like that. I didn't consciously think about it a ton until after, but the risk that posed to me and the pressure it puts on a relationship, things I've learned now and things that I wouldn't do again in the future. And so it was really, really hard to have to navigate that, especially the hardest part, especially in relation to the rumination, was the gym, sharing that gym for a month after the breakup. We were both going there, and some days it was kind of okay, but it really just dysregulated the shit out of me. It was terrible. Anytime the door would open, I would wonder if it was her coming in, if she would look at me or not look at me that day, or if there'd be some interaction that would happen. And it was literally just a rumination engine, that gym, and was so not helpful for me. And I eventually, another turning point in my entire healing journey was switching gyms. I had the conversation with some of the people that were there. I was sad about some of those relationships and stuff, but it was just so hard for me to be there and stay true to myself. And I couldn't do it. And so I switched gyms and I started going to CrossFit on 18th down in the Crossroads. To this day, I don't think that anyone there really understands or knows how helpful and how much they helped me in a really, 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 really hard time in my life. And now they're like my family. I don't know what I'd do without them. I love all the people there. I love the owners, Mike and John and Dana and Chris and Jacob, the coaches, and all of the people that hang out there. One of my best friends now, Trent, I met at CrossFit on 18th. My buddy Connor, there's so many people that I've met there that really helped me, that started to hang out with me, that wanted to start doing stuff, that got me active, got me doing the things. And it was so freaking powerful to socially connect with those other people and create my own little family and get out of an environment that was just constantly triggering me and into one where I was creating this new version of myself. I could be whoever I wanted. I could make friendships that were my own and only mine. And it was just more solid. And that was so freaking powerful. Nothing beats that. There's nothing that could beat shifting your environment. So that was a really, really big one. The city was a bit of a trigger for me as well. Pretty much anywhere I looked was kind of a trigger. There was a lot of things around the city that just reminded me of her, which I had to work through and shift my relationship with and learn how to connect different experiences with those triggers and those moments and the things that would come in, which was helpful. The other thing that I had to do, which is hard to admit, but is a big piece of the work that I did, is grieving the loss, a piece of my identity that came with dating someone that had a pretty cool job, a higher profile job, and just admitting that I identified with some of that. And that was absolutely a piece. It was uncomfortable to kind of recognize and work through, but it definitely was something that was there and something that I had to kind of work through. Puckett helped me a lot with that. Caitlin helped me a lot with that. So that was super helpful as far as our intertwined lives. confidence, and just really recognizing that like I also do crazy stuff. Like I'm a catch. And I just early on, I over-indexed that. Like I fumbled and I lost the thing and like all the stuff. But then I was like, the more I worked on this, the more I healed. I was like, wait a minute, like I'm a catch. I'm awesome. I'm doing really cool stuff. I'm changing the world. Like I like not in like a cocky way or whatever, but just like a regaining self-esteem and self-confidence that I'm a catch. And that was helpful to make that reframe. And like, oh, she fumbled. And like some of that stuff, not as helpful, but still there are parts of me that are like, oh yeah, that's right. So that was helpful, but something I definitely had to work through as well. The most practical thing I could say as far as intertwining your lives is like really taking a minute and figuring out like where are they intertwined the most and starting to build your own autonomous identity. I knew CrossFit gym. I started a men's group of other fellow entrepreneurs that I hang out with all the time and a really, really, really intentional friend group. I started doing more intramural, like around KC. It's KC Crew that does like adult intramural things and doing some leagues with that, going to different run clubs and going to events and like just more intentionally building my life and my identity. Like it also helped that the business started to do much better and I was less having to be so working 24/7. So that also helped. And that is a really powerful way to help you make sure that a future breakup doesn't just crater your entire life structure overall. And it just so happens that those are great things to be doing if you are going through this as well, because you got to do it at some point. So that's a big thing. Is I for sure got a little bit lost probably in that relationship and work and like just doing stuff only with her, but being able to like expand and like recreate those things for myself, the social connections and the different compartments and stuff, that was really powerful and helped me untangle some of the things that were connected.
Real quick, as like a follow-up to this, because I happened to just see a comment on YouTube Shorts that kind of went along this. In response to one of our videos, we're kind of like working out how you do some of these things. And that was like, well, obviously this is really, really different when you have like kids together. So touch on that like really, really briefly, because a lot of people that we work with are a little bit older. Like the age that we have set for becoming her is like, these two. And so maybe a lot of these people already like, have had their like lives intertwined, but it's like their lives are intertwined in a way deeper way than just, like their friendships or their hobbies where they can kind of branch off and find their own thing to do here. So give like a little bit of advice for those people in this situation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, kids does make things more challenging. Like, and depending on the type of breakup, it could be extraordinarily challenging, or if it's a healthier breakup, you can create systems and processes for these conversations and such. But otherwise, some of the best things that you can start to do if it's really, really challenging is learning. If you've never heard of gray rocking and like what low contact looks like, that can be a really powerful tool for helping people or helping you through those moments where you have to pass off kids or you have to do something with the kids or that kind of stuff, which is gray rocking is essentially learning how to not really respond or recognize that you're going to be there might be emotions or they might try to trigger you. And it's really just responding non-emotionally and being able to do that. The other thing is having support systems and things like that outside of the interactions that you have to be a part of with them and creating your own friend groups and things like that and things that you can go do with your kids and such. Maybe that's your family and maybe it's friends, things like that. That could be super, super helpful. And then not going and doing it alone can be super powerful. Like if you have to go pass off the kids or you have to interact with them, bring somebody with you so that you don't have to do it by yourself. Not always possible, but it can be super helpful, especially early on in relation to like having to interact with kids and things like that. And then I always suggest IFS work because if you can understand that parts are going to pop up when you interact with these people and have to pass them off and such, being able to model a healthy interaction is one of the best things you can do for your kids. And being able to understand and be in self and understand that your partner's parts are going to be coming at you or your ex's parts are going to be coming at you, and how you handle that is what your kids observe and learn. And so being able to stay in yourself, stay calm, stay curious, stay compassionate takes a lot. But doing your own work and your own therapy and your own IFS work can really help you in those moments that you have to interact with someone, especially if you have kids with them and things like that as well. And then in relation to the kids, communicate, have conversations with them. Like kids are more resilient and understanding and tough than people give them credit for. Hiding things and not talking about the things means they're going to make meaning in their head by themselves. So you can not talk about it and allow them to do that and lead them into a therapy chair one day, or have a conversation with them and just talk to them about it. What's going on in your mind? Like, what do you think about this? Like, what are you feeling? What are you thinking? Like, maybe they let you in, maybe they don't, but just help them. Have a conversation with them. Don't try to hide it from their little brains. Like, they are tougher than you think. I'm not saying that they need to don't parentify them and don't turn them into your therapist, but be curious and compassionate with them about what they're experiencing and what this is like for them, and be there as their parent to help them co-regulate. Those would be some of the thoughts I'd have, like off the top of my head.
I think that's a good touch on some of that, just to hit both sides of the spectrum there. So now we've kind of made it through all of like the deep breakup stuff. We're gonna transition a little here into the healing journey, what this actually looks like and kind of being on the other side. The first question that we've sort of asked before is, when and how did you start experiencing joy?
Yeah, so the biggest thing for me was I was doing some exiled, like deeper, like working with my deeper abandonment wound work with Caitlin in therapy, and I was able to bring myself, my higher self, like the inner parent of me, into the breakup scene, like sitting on the couch with my ex and stuff, and I was able to be with that wounded part that was just stunned. Like there was a part of me that in that moment just got stuck. Like I couldn't believe the words that just came out of her mouth. I was sad. I was crying. I was like, my heart was racing. I was shaking. I was just paralyzed. And I was able to go back to that moment with myself and be there for that part of me and help it for the first time feel safe instead of just raw and just exposed. And that brought so much agency back into my life and so much joy and compassion and curiosity and playfulness and just connectedness and light back into my life that helped a ton. That I was able to do that for myself internally just made me feel powerful, made me feel confident again. And so that was one of the biggest shifts that happened. The closure letter that I talked about earlier, that was really, really powerful as well. And work started to flow a little bit easier, like decreased some stress there. My sleep started to improve, which also gave me more brain space and capacity in my head. And I started to be able to think of a future, and like I got out of the past. And so that really, really helped. And I went from like ruminations and like crying almost every freaking day to that just happening less and less and less. The first real kind of glimpse that I had, like it happened early May, like May 5th and 6th. Towards the end of May, like 3-ish weeks out, I did that work with Caitlin. I felt some self-energy come in, and I was like playing basketball. And I just remember that being a really good, like fun time that I just wasn't thinking about stuff. It was just cool. It was fun. I enjoyed that time. And that was towards the end of May. Through June and July, it was like really, really up and down. I had some good evenings. Most mornings were really brutal. I had some like FOMO moments where I saw an old group of friends doing stuff that I would have used to been invited to, but then I couldn't. And I was just kind of chilling and still developing my own thing. And so felt some FOMO, and that was really hard, especially in kind of July when there's just more stuff happening outside and stuff, and just missing out on all of those, because that's the window of time that we didn't date within. Like I think we were together for like 8 or 9 months, and that it was the summer months where the gap was. And so it was all of like what could be and the potential. And like, I just was missing out on that, and that really sucked. The biggest shift, complete shift, I'd say would be August-ish. So about like 3 months out, like it started to feel more distant a little bit. Like there was just less emotion attached to things. And I even wrote in my journal that it was hard to believe some of the things that I wrote from the early stages of the breakup, which is just crazy how much progress you can make. So it was quantitatively, I was just a lot different. And so the fleeting moments of joy really started to come back around week 3. And I was really doing dedicated work. It took deep trauma work in therapy with Caitlin to get there that early, but it was kind of fleeting at first. And it wasn't really until I had a sustained feeling of moving forward, and like until like 3 months or so, 3.5 months out, still some ups and downs a little bit, and still stuff that pops in, but even a year out, but far, far, far better. But that is about how long that I would say it really took to get to that place.
Yeah, and we'll touch on this more kind of with the last question. We're almost to the end here, but also just to emphasize, like there is no really like end of the healing journey, which is something that we have to go into like every single long form that we do here, and try to like really, really emphasize on, just because this was your experience and kind of being able to work through that in a matter of months. You also had a lot of the tools to be able to do that, you know, being in the field that we're in here and having an established therapist and all of like the resources, knowing the neuroscience behind what is going to be helpful for you and what's not. But that'll give, you know, you guys kind of an idea on where to get started and what it feels like.
That's a huge part of the bringing the joy back into my life, was being able to like knowing that the moment it turned into something that I was going through, and I was learning and using all those resources I had available in my research and my education and all of this stuff, to turn this into what has now become our becoming programs, Becoming Her, Becoming Him, and that philosophy, that was a big turning point. Like that brought me a lot of joy, because I could channel my pain into a purpose, and it really shifted from grief into growth. And that was really, really powerful to have that project to work on, because it was something that was bigger than me, that was serving others, that was going to help other people. So yeah, that's a good point. That was a big piece. Building that Becoming Her OS and Becoming OS was a big part of this.
Sweet. So I think this one will be a quicker one, but I had to ask it because this is a question from our friend Trevor, who you guys would have seen as the avoidant in our attachment translator series over on like Instagram and here on Shorts. He asked you, would you go through it again if you knew you'd come out stronger?
Yeah, so I pulled a direct quote from this. When I wrote it, when I was preparing for this, I was like a little bit emotional as I reread what I wrote. But I said I would go through it 100 times if I knew I would eventually find the one that could hold the power to destroy me but never use it, never leave, and just be with me through it all. It's worth the risk. Love is worth it. That was a big moment for me when I wrote that out, and I still believe it. I do. Like, it is worth it. It took me a long time to get to that point, but it is true. I love love. I want to be loved. I want to love someone. I want to know them. I want them to know me. Like, it's all worth it. Going all in and letting my ex all the way in did end up hurting me really badly. And it was worth it for the depth of love and the vulnerability that I got to experience. Like, the glimmers of what a truly deep relationship could feel like were there. And just because it didn't work out with her doesn't make it impossible to find someone else who actually stays and that I can do these things with. It just really, I've shifted it now to where it proves it's possible. And it's really been helpful. And the other thing is that looking back, I know that I showed up. I loved deeply. I did the right things. There are things that I could do differently and better and that I've learned for sure. Overall, I really showed up as a person that the type of partner I'd want to be or have as well. I didn't just expect it. I showed up as that kind of person. Yeah, I still got hurt. But again, I gained awareness, pattern recognition, emotional depth, like self-trust, and it's something a lot of people just don't necessarily get. So I did gain a perspective from going through all of it. And so I would go through it again. Like, it's freaking excruciating. Like, it sucks, but it's worth it. Like, if someone's really going to change your life and be with you in the ways that you want to be with someone and like do life with you, that outcome is worth whatever it takes to get there. So bottom line, I would go through it again. I would do it.
Right. And I mean, also just to add on, like, obviously we're in a different point because, as previously mentioned, we've pivoted like our content and stuff and made it about this, which was proven to be like a lot more successful than anything we've ever done. And we're able to find like a much better community with all of you. And so it's truly proven helpful in more ways than one.
Dude, that's a great point too. Before I was doing really heavily, like, we started out on heavy, big T trauma, abusive relationships, like really, really heavy stuff. And that got challenging. And the more I tried to solve those problems, the more I realized that there's systemic things that is hard for me to be able to work with, like especially domestic violence and things like that. Like, people need resources in their local towns and oftentimes need to relocate. And there's so many variables that made it hard for me to help in the ways I wanted to help that I was like, okay, like, I want to pivot my content a little bit because I just don't feel like I can serve this group in the way that I want to. And so I wanted to pivot a little bit so we could start attracting different types of people and helping different people in a more effective way, in a more complete way. During the relationship, even, I was all over the place talking about anxious achievers to entrepreneurs to creators to, I mean, we were all over the place. Always neuroscience, always mental health and things like that. But we tried some business content. We tried some men's stuff, like all sorts of stuff. And then after this, it became very clear for me there was a huge gap in relation to healing heartbreak, and that unprocessed heartbreak and baggage is what has led to a lot of the issues that we see in modern dating. And I have a lot to say about that. And a lot of people want to hear about it. And so that pivot has been amazing. Like, we made that pivot, and I think we were at just 400,000 or something followers across all of our accounts. And this is like a year ago. We're now at like 1.2 million followers across all of our accounts. 5 to 10 million people see our content every single day. Like, it's just insane. Like, how rapidly this has shifted and helped us improve. The revenue of the company is doing better. Like, we doubled our revenue and we're on track. We've already doubled our revenue from last year, this year. Like, so just all these metrics from something so painful happening and being willing to talk about it and be vulnerable about it. And I do have some head trash around talking about it because I want to protect privacy and like that kind of stuff. But again, I do pride myself in being willing to go beat my face against the wall, go through something really, really hard and shitty, figure out how to help myself, and then talk about how to do that and help other people do that. And so that's what I did, turning pain into purpose. And that is a really great point. Like, a lot changed, and it just became a lot more clear on who we could help, how we could help them after going through this myself. And I think bringing that lived experience into my content and into the work that I do to help people, I think that is a really powerful. I don't think I'd be as good at what I do if I hadn't gone through some of this stuff.
Yeah, which one of the things that like we've been able to do that you've mentioned a few times was like build out the Becoming Her program, which is, this can be like a smooth transition here. Because the next question that we got is from Flo, who is helping us out with the Becoming Her program right now and selling it. So some of you guys might run into her, who asked, is what you went through the same for guys and for girls?
Yeah, so it's a nuanced question. The core wounds are very similar, exactly similar, honestly, in most contexts. Abandonment, rejection, injustice, not good enough, betrayal, betrayal, those don't have a gender. Like I, in my content, articulate things that were in my head and beliefs that I had in my own head and conversations I had and things like that that were in my male head, and millions of women comment on those posts and things like that. And tons of guys comment on those posts as well. And so some of those core wounds, some of those, the mental state and the way that you feel is less gendered than you would think. Some of the ways that it differs is how it's expressed, how the pain and some of these things are kind of expressed socially, what's permitted socially. Men are generally less likely to have support systems in the same ways, less permission to cry. Sometimes the language to even name what they're feeling isn't there, which we've talked about in previous conversations and things like that. And I personally can attest to really struggling at being good at being mad or being hurt and talking about that. A little bit easier with CJ, like with CJ or with Chloe, like talking with like women about it, and Caitlin, my therapist and stuff. But with other guys, it was challenging. My brother, my friend Chris, and like it was a little bit easier with Sam. Sam helped me kind of talk about some of the like more emotional stuff, but a little bit more challenging from like my lived experience and then what I witness and see with women. That being said, a lot of those things can also be true for women too. So I would say overall, directionally, it is the same. The process for healing is the same. If you have a brain, it's the same directionally. There are some variables that are unique for men and women. Like, for example, men do not have a menstrual cycle. Surprise, surprise. Like, and the chemicals that are in the brain are different every single week of a menstrual cycle. And we talk about that inside of Becoming Her. We obviously don't talk about that inside of Becoming Him. Like, so there are some little nuanced things like that. But again, overall, our brains are more similar than they are different, whether you're a guy or a girl. So it's very directionally accurate or very directionally similar in relation to the healing process, in relation to the skills that we teach inside Becoming Her and Becoming Him. Oftentimes in Becoming Her, we have women that are more in like what has been traditionally called like masculine energy, but they're more in like a protective mode. They have to be in control. They want to take lead, and they do that to protect themselves. And they want to learn how to be able to experience more than just that command and control zone and be more open and free and like vulnerable and more feminine. Again, we don't like these words, but they make sense in people's minds at the current moment. So we'll use them. There's not a ton of like specific research on those terms, but directionally they make sense. And then in the Becoming Him, we teach men how to be healthy masculinity. Like, how do you create structure without being domineering? How do you create emotional safety, physical safety? How do you respond instead of react and get defensive? Like, how do you do some of these things that men are just not taught, but they are skills nonetheless. And so that's some of the stuff that we do that's a little bit different inside of Becoming Her and Becoming Him and such. I would say overall, the healing process and what's going on in the brain and the beliefs and the core wounds, very, very similar. Some of the skills at the very end of our Becoming programs are slightly different, but that would be the biggest differentiator.
Yeah. I'm glad that she asked this too, because this is something that we get, a lot of comments about for people that are finding us that are like new to any of the pages, as well as like, why are you speaking to women as like a guy in this field? So I think like that's a great answer on like a lot of the core stuff isn't different. And then like, from working with women for this long since the start of your career, obviously those intricacies of like the socialization and how that impacts this. So just a little add-on there on like why I think that's helpful to understand.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting. It's what you get the most reps on that you become better at. Like, and it's been almost 10 years that I've been working with 85 to 94% women. That's most of our followers. That's who I work with the most and who's like problems and puzzles that I help solve the most often. And so I have a lot of reps doing that stuff, for better or for worse. And the people that I work with, they feel more comfortable having a guy's perspective. In our last round of Becoming Her, one of the ladies asked, can you give me the male perspective of like what's going on? What is it like to be a guy today and dating today? And like, what do all these things feel like? And I wrote like a multiple page Google Doc of like a guy's lived experience. And the ladies in this group, they were like, holy shit. Like every one of them in their post the review afterwards said that was one of the most important things that we talked about, is being able to understand from a guy's mouth what's going on in relation to dating and relationships, and the way it helped them conceptualize their own self-worth and what's going on inside of them was so different, because the stories they were telling themselves were so different than what was actually going on inside a guy's mind. And that's a perspective that I'm able to offer overall. To me, it's not this crazy of a concept. I've always had female therapists. Like, it makes sense to me. If I want to know what's going on inside of a woman's mind, I should be curious with a woman and let her tell me what's going on. Like, and so it just always kind of made sense to me. If you want to date a guy, like, it might be helpful to have a perspective from a guy. So who has also had lived experience with the trauma that you've gone through. So I kind of crisscross those two roads often, and it works.
All right. With that, we're going to move into our last question. It's been a long one, but now we're going to get to the question I'm sure you all have been waiting for, which is, how do you reapproach dating, and have you?
Yeah, carefully. The way that I reapproach dating is as an experiment. This is what I teach inside my programs. It's how I live my life. For me personally, I think it was maybe at the 5-6 month-ish mark. I had done a lot of healing work. I'd done a lot of the inner work, and I was ready to test getting back out there and like seeing what was going on potentially. I didn't know if I was perfectly ready, to be honest. I wasn't sure. I knew I was ready to run an experiment though. And so I went on a couple dates and realized in that process that I was not in fact ready. There was a lot of stuff that came up that I realized that I needed to still work through, and I let those people know, then focused on myself and my own solidarity again, and took the time to work on those patterns and those things that I need to work on for another few months. And then I think it was around like the 11 month, about a year-ish, that I've more recently started to get back into dating again and running another experiment on like what this is like. Do I have time for this? Do I want to make time for this? And this round has been far, far better. Like less comparison, more focused on this person, the people that I'm like interactions and stuff that I'm having and stuff like that. And my life feels more complete. I feel like I have social structures. I have support systems. I have life outside of a relationship and outside of work. While my work and my purpose are like the biggest aspect of my life, I have more diverse area. I have more things that I'm doing, people I'm hanging with, like, and that is super helpful. And I feel more balanced. And so I feel, and I've done the inner work on the abandonment and some of the stories that I tell myself and early patterns in dating that I really want to pay attention to. And so that's really been that's kind of been the journey that I've gone on, where I've looked at the anger and things like that and processed that, the powerlessness, the overperforming, people pleasing, avoiding talking about my needs, and really have shifted into a place where I'm feeling I'm comfortable. I'm just going to be me. I want to create space for someone in my life. And that was has been really, really powerful and helpful in running the second experiment. The other thing I talked about with my therapist, two things, is there's a part of me that was scared to go all in again because of how badly I was hurt with my ex. I've talked about that a couple times, and it's something I actively had to work on in therapy, and really developing the belief it's worth it, that all of what I've been through and what I'm going to go through is worth it to get to the person that changed my life. I create a relationship with it that like alters the face of my life. Like that, I had to get to that point before I was ready to really date. The other thing too, in early dating now, like it's kind of wild. There's nothing quite beats time on earth, which is hard to conceptualize. But I was talking about this yesterday in therapy with Caitlin, and I was just like, dude, like dating as a 30-year-old is so different than dating as a 20-year-old or a 24-year-old or a 20, whatever, which you could say that's not in like a I'm better than you type of way. It's just, I look back now and there's just so much more time on earth, and these experiences that I have now when I'm dating, I just see things more clearly. And I think going through what I went through in my last relationship made it very clear, red flags that I absolutely will not ignore and that are far more apparent to me now than they were previously. And things that I will expect, and things, the way that I'll show up and the way I operate inside those relationships is vastly different. And the things I'm looking for are vastly different. And I'm more willing and able to say that I need and want those things directly and communicate them. I'm still working on it. Like I'm still like, I'm a work in progress. Everybody is, but feel much better about getting back into dating in relation to that. And one of the biggest things early on when I was initially starting to date and stuff that me and Caitlin talked about this is with my ex, it was the first time in my life that I truly was like, I am going to marry this person. Like, this is my person. I'll spend the rest of my life. It was complete and done in my brain. And I felt so absolutely certain about that really early on. Like I wasn't like love bombing type stuff, but I just had this kind of feeling, and that just grew over the relationship, and it just grew into over the time that we were together, just into this absolute certainty that I had. And I felt that from like the first couple of dates. And I asked Caitlin, I was like, dude, I felt that way, but it didn't work out. We broke up. This happened. What happened, right? So was that feeling something that I should be looking for, and that certainty something I should be looking for in the future? Or is that feeling something that was me associating chaos with chemistry and just it's not what I should be looking for, because it led to a negative outcome? And that I was really concerned about this, because I was like, dude, like, how do I trust myself? Like, what do I do? And Caitlin mentioned that for her, she had dated someone before her who she got married to, and she had that same feeling. She had that spark. She had that intention, or she had that knowing with an ex. Then it didn't work out. and they broke up. And she had that feeling again with who she's now married to. And I was like, okay. And so that was another moment, another thing where I was kind of grateful looking back. I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm glad that, and Chloe helped with this too. She's like, do you really think that love is not abundant? You really think you can't feel that way with another person? Like love is not that's not how love works. Like it is totally abundant and totally open, and this proves that you can do it again and that you can follow that again, and it's worth it to follow that again. And it's just now more trust but verify, and have that perspective, and just that knowing is something that you can trust. When I really got to believing that also made it easier for me to date and get back out there again. So I am back out there. That's some of the work that I've done in the thrones of dating. I'm not an app guy. I go and I go talk to people. I meet them in my CrossFit gym or at a run club or at a coffee shop or different things like that. And that's more what I'm looking at right now. I talked to Caitlin about this as well, because I was going into 2026 like hardcore. I'm going to find my wife. I'm going to like very command and control, top down doing mode. And she really challenged me to shift into more of a being mode and let go of the control and having to make it work and just allow. And I was like, damn, okay, I can do that. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm not in this place where I feel like I have to find somebody. I don't think that is what brings them towards you or attracts them towards you. So it's not where I'm at. I'm just in a place where I'm open to connection. I've created space in my life for connection, and it's something that I want, but it's not a need. And that's kind of the mindset that I've gone into 2026 with, and it served me well. I mean, I've gone on some great dates. I've met some cool people and things like that. And I know, I'm absolutely certain my person is on her way to me right now. I'll find her. She's out there. I'm very grateful that I have love to look forward to. That's where I'm at now. Like I get to fall in love in the future. And that's fucking awesome. Like I'm very excited for that. Like some stranger is going to become the love of my life, and I'm grateful as fuck for that. And I'm really excited for that. And that's kind of the mindset that I've got going into dating now.
I think that that's a really nice place to wrap up. That's nice and hopeful. But we'll hopefully give you all some like optimism on if you're like super fresh off your breakup or wherever you're at in the journey, that like you don't know where you're going to be a year from then. It might take a few months to work through it, but you will get to the other side.
100%. There's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love getting like comments from all of you who are like on the other side and you're like, wow, I wish I knew a lot of this a lot quicker, but we're happy to have you here now.
We are glad you're here now. So I appreciate everybody submitting these things, like a little bit more of a vulnerable episode, but I don't mind sharing some of these things, try to protect privacy, but be able to explain and talk about my personal lived experience as well. So I hope you found this helpful. If you did, please drop a like, hit subscribe so that you never miss one of our long form pieces of content. And we'll see you next time. Make sure to submit a question too on our next AMA. Watch my story for when our next question gets submitted.
Every other Thursday. So by the time that this is out, there should be one up for you guys to go take a look at and answer. So make sure you do that because
go submit some more.
We're in there. Perfect.
Oh yeah. All right. Peace out, everybody.